could you apply this?
A tree.
There is a context which you could apply it there. Like you want to be here, the best time to be here is today, but there's something you can kind of like look further down the trough. Yeah.
I think it can apply for like people who make important decisions like later in their life. So like people who want to find out like what they want to do in the future. Like if someone decided one day that they really like had a passion for like engineering things, and it's already too late to go back to like high school to take all those courses that they needed, but they can still start trying to get experience and still good time to do that, rather than to just give up to give up on it just because the best opportunities have already passed.
Yeah, because the opportunity to be a young engineer might have passed, but the opportunity to be an engineer hasn't yet passed. So, especially today, think about this. Like, so it'd be too late to go back to high school and get those core classes. So if you wanted to be an engineer, what could you do instead? Especially in 2022, man.
Fix cars?
How could you get that education?
Online?
Yeah. There's always an Indian guy on YouTube, man. There's a lot you can learn that way just to get those basics. And then you can go back to school. You can go to community college, and you can go to university. And it's going to take you some time, for sure. But it was always going to take you time. So you may have lost the opportunity to be a young engineer, but you haven't lost the opportunity to be an engineer. And I guess that becomes the question, what's the thing that you want to be, a young engineer, or do you want to be an engineer? Especially at this point now, if I were to ask some of you guys what you want to be when you get older, besides bigger, it would be we can kind of say based off of our present interests, but I don't know what your interests are going to be like in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, and you don't know either, because a lot of things can change. An example I point to is like Mike Tyson, the boxer. And I don't remember if it was in this class we were talking about it. What does he do today? Does anybody know? He raises pigeons.
Really?
Yeah. You ask him, he's 20 years old, he's the world champion of boxing, the youngest world champion of boxing history. He's unified all 3 belts. And if you'd asked 20-year-old Mike Tyson, so what are you going to be in the future? Do you think he would have said back then, I'm going to raise pigeons? No, but life happened, and he took on new interests. You lose old interests, you pick up new interests, and then you see where you are. There's an example I think of with this. A friend of mine, he graduated from high school, and he used to go to UCLA with me. He wasn't registered for classes, he wasn't enrolled in the university, he just didn't have anything to do during the day. So on my way to school, I'd pick him up, and he'd go to class with me. And the professors knew that he wasn't enrolled in the course, but in universities, they don't really care. You kind of show up, and you can listen in. He would do the assignments. We would talk about the stuff on the way to and from school. He'd hang out with me all day. He'd participate in the discussions in class. He'd raise his, all that. And then when I was I was in my last year, I remember that much. And I was asking him, like, how come you haven't just like enrolled in school and done all this and gotten credit for it? And he was explaining to me that he just didn't have the money to do it. He didn't know anything about financial aid or loans or anything like that. And I didn't know either until I was most of the way through school. That's when I found out about it. It's interesting because you guys get that stuff like hammered on you constantly, financial aid, financial aid. They drag you down to the counseling center to fill out your FAFSA, and they help you do it and all that. They didn't used to do that when I was in school. And so he was convinced, I just can't afford it, And then so I explained to him about the financial aid, and he's like, oh my God, are you serious? I could have been doing this all along and getting credit for it? I said, yeah. And he's shaking his head, and he just kind of says, man, I wish I knew this, 2 years ago. That's how long he went with me. I wish I had known this 2 years ago. And the thing is, I did mention it to him, throughout the time that we were going together. He just wasn't in a place to hear it yet. And then when I had that conversation with him, I remember he just shook his head and said, man, I'm too old now. I think we were like 21. Yeah. Oh my. And when you're 21, you're saying like, I'm too old. I don't know, man. I think that there's something wrong with your perception of time. And I was telling him, well, no, and he goes, well, yeah, but by the time I finish, I'm going to end up being 25 or 26, and then it's going to be, he's going to be thinking about how that's when most people have their careers going. And he's an interesting guy because he's very smart, and he's perhaps the most talented guitar player I've ever heard in my life. I don't care who you mention. I don't care what band you mention. This guy's incredibly talented. And he's also very funny. And the last time I talked to him on the phone, he was sitting, he was working at the Staples Centers as a security guard. And his job was to make sure that nobody walked down this hallway during an event. So he sat in a chair, and if anybody walked down this hallway, he would tell them, you can't go down this hallway, you have to go around. That was his job. Very smart guy, like I said. I mean, if you know, the grades that he was getting when the professors would grade his stuff, he was getting A's and B's and things, and they were not easy classes. He was with me when I was taking upper division courses, and so he has a lot of potential, and even as a musician, a lot of potential. A very funny guy, and so he told me at that time, and this is probably going back, I'm not exaggerating, 10 years or so, 12 years maybe. And he told me he was going to be getting into comedy because he wanted to be a stand-up comedian. And he was working on a set. And I said, dude, if the night you perform, you tell me, I'm there. I'll come down, I'll drive up there. But he never did it. He never did it. I still talk to him through social media. He sent me a message a couple of days ago, and he asked me if I'd ever seen Star Trek New Generation. And I just said back and said, no, I never saw it. My dad watched it. You know, is there a reason you're asking me? And he just said, no, just wondering. Okay.
Huh.
Yeah, and this is a guy who has such an incredible level of potential in a number of areas. He's not even just talented in one area. Yeah, but you know, he never really saw himself going far into life generally. It's a long story, I'll leave it at that. He never saw himself living very long. He planned to kill himself at one point. And then he had a daughter, and that changed his mind. He actually had the daughter intentionally because he planned to kill himself. And then when she was born, it changed his mind. He decided he wanted to live. But he's kind of not, he hasn't done anything about what his potential is. Now, if you were to ask him at 21 years old, is it too late to do the things in life you want to do? He said, yeah, it's too late. I've been too old and all that. And if you'd asked him at 30, he'd have said, man, I wish I had done it at 21. Now you ask him, he's probably 38 or so, 39. And if you ask him now, he'd probably say, yeah, I wish I had done it at 30. The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. When we say things like, it's never too late, you can still do it. Sometimes it's too late. Again, if you're in your 40s, you're not going to play in the NBA. It just isn't going to happen. There are things in life that it's too late. It's too late to do. But the best for a lot of things, the best time to have done it would have been maybe 20 years ago. But the second best time is right now, because if you don't do it now, you're going to be thinking the exact same thing in 10 or 20 years. I wish I had done it back then. I wish I had done it back then. I wish I had done it back then. Questions? Yeah.
Well, I take it as as an opposite, not like 20 years ago, but like 20 years from now on. Like right now, what I'm thinking of doing, I'm trying to make that work. Like say if it doesn't work, I'm not really thinking about what I'm gonna do 20 years from now, because I might say, oh, well, maybe I want to go do mechanical. I want to do cars. I want to build a car. Like say this, right? But then out of nowhere, I might just change that course and go straight opposite and be like, I want to be a doctor, I want to be a lawyer, right? But there will be a time from now on that I'll be like, oh, I like this, I'm going to do it, and then I actually do it, but I won't know if I'll succeed in it or I'll fail. It's kind of like a learning process for me. That's how I take it.
But it's a learning process also of learning yourself and learning your opportunities. So, for example, is anybody in here right now thinking that someday you're going to be a Walmart manager? No. But Walmart has managers, which means that at some point somebody had a plan in life, and then things changed a little bit, and then they realized, I could be a manager at Walmart, and then that's what they do. I mention that because a friend of mine, his girlfriend is a manager at a Walmart, and I saw her the weekend before Halloween. And I asked her how long she wanted to do that for. I don't know how to talk. And so she just said, oh, I just kind of fell into it. There was an opportunity, I applied for it, I got it, and it pays pretty well, so I just went ahead and did it. And then I asked her if she plans to make a lifelong career out of that, and she said yes, without hesitating, just yes, this is what I plan to do for the rest of my life. And that's neat. Will she? I don't know. Maybe something's going to happen where life is going to take her in a completely different direction. You never can tell. And that's the thing about it, maybe staying fluid to the opportunities that become available to you. Because sometimes you're going to find that maybe if you planted that tree 20 years ago, you'd be in a completely different place in life. Of course you would be. But you'd be in a completely different place in life almost no matter what you do. If you stop coming here, you're going to be in a completely different place in life in 5 years. If you deeply apply yourself here, then you're going to be in a completely different place. Hell, you'd be in a different place a year from now if you did something like that. No matter what you apply yourself towards, it's going to take you in a different direction in life. Is it better or worse? Yes. Yes. Whichever way you go is going to take you towards some of the greatest tragedies and some of the greatest triumphs of your life. The difference is whichever direction you go in, there are going to be different triumphs and different tragedies. That's all. And so, and unfortunately, you don't even get to choose. In other words, you can't project yourself forward and say, well, if I go in this direction, my tragedy is going to be X and my triumph is going to be Y. If I go in this one, it's going to be P and then Q. But if I go in this one, it's going to be A and C. You can't see the end of it. You just have to go forward. And then when you go forward, you're going to, you'll encounter opportunities, you'll encounter obstacles, you'll encounter all kinds of things. But this kind of goes back to what we were saying the other day, that there are these great experiences in life. And of course, there are these really low experiences in life. And your life is going to be made up primarily of your mind. Which ones do you dwell on? Do you dwell on the positives of it? And that's not just to say, like, you have to be optimistic. No, there is good stuff that happens to you. Even if you think, nothing good ever happens to me, then you're not paying attention. Just like if you think nothing bad ever happens to you, you're not paying attention. Both of those two things happen to you. You can choose to focus on one or the other. And of course, it's more attractive to us to focus on the negative things that happen because they seem to have the longest lasting effect on us. It also makes us feel like we're entitled to have good times. I don't remember if it was in this class, but I was asking one of my classes, when something bad happens to you, I wonder if you ever sit there and you're like, oh my God, why me? Why does this stuff always happen to me? When something good happens to you, though, you sit there and say, oh my God, why me? Why does good stuff always happen to me? Both of them happen to you, and both of them get chosen by you. In other words, sometimes it's just dumb, stupid luck and chance that you end up in a good place or a bad place. A lot of times it's the choices that we make. A lot of times it's a combination of those two things. But the one choice that you have, and the one thing that you always have control over is your mind. You can choose how to perceive these things. I can see it as a positive or I can see it as a negative. I failed to plant this tree 20 years ago. I'm too old now. I didn't plant this tree 20 years ago. I could plant it today, and I'm far more mature today. If my friend had started school at 21, he would have finished at like 25, 26 years old, but I guarantee you he would have had straight A's. No question. And then that guy, knowing what I know about him, he could have gone off to graduate school, and he could have gotten a PhD. And he would have gotten his PhD probably faster than most other PhDs. Because even though he starts school later, he's more mature, he's going to have better grades because he's going to take it more seriously because he's more mature. And then he's going to end up in graduate school, and he'll get through the whole process. So overall, he would have been an older undergraduate, but he would have been a younger PhD than everybody else if he had started at 21.
Oh, he's gonna flex.
Yeah. Or he could, do what he does now, which is really not much, unfortunately. I still love him. He's still a friend. And if he ever needed anything, he can call me, and I'm there for him. But he's not what he could have been. And of course, none of us are what we could have been. None of us are. We recognize that. But hopefully, he'll kind of turn things around. And if anybody can turn things around, it's him. He's a sharp dude, and he's got some motivation. If he applies it, he just needs to surround himself, I think, with more motivating people. Sometimes he was living with me for a while because he was homeless, and he was telling me that he got more done, like in the year or two that he was living with me, than he's gotten done in the whole rest of his life combined. Because he's like, I have a motor. If I commit myself to something, I go and I do it 100%, and it gets done. He's not like that. But being around someone like that can motivate you to do that. That's why it's also so important to surround yourself with the right people. If you surround yourself with people who are, dragging you down, dragging themselves down. It's like I asked that question. I wonder if any of you have ever been if any of you have ever hung out with the wrong crowd, as we say. And then by you being there, the wrong crowd said, you know what, man? We've been living wrong. We need to be more like you. And completely changed their ways and became the good kids. I don't know if that's ever happened to you. I wonder how many of us have been the good kid who hung out with the wrong crowd and became part of the wrong crowd. You know, we tend to bring ourselves down. If you're surrounding yourself with people like that, then they're going to bring you down. And it isn't a matter that they're lesser people. It isn't that you don't like them anymore. You can still love those people. But you have to recognize that you're being brought down and you're going to end up having to think of this in 20 years. Man, I should have done that 20 years ago. You know, surround yourself with people who help to elevate you and sharpen you. Iron sharpens iron. That's why you pick friends who make you better. You pick significant others who make you better. You know, you pick business people. You go into a job. Don't just take any job that you can get. Take a job, I mean, maybe at first because you need a job, but after that you look for something that can make you better. You look for people who are motivated. You find the people at that job who are motivated to become better. It doesn't mean you have to stay at that job for the rest of your life, but that's a hell of a great character trait to learn. So it starts with that mind thing that we were talking about the other day. That your life is only going to be as good as your mind. You can focus on, man, it's too late. Or you can focus on, I'm more mature now, and I have more of a motor now, and I'm more driven now. I see the consequences of it now. So I might be running a little bit late, or a lot of bit late, but I'm going to be better than everybody else who gets there.
Maybe.
Yeah. Questions, comments, concerns, complaints, criticisms, critiques?